On a dark stormy night in 1488, a baby's cry echoed through the depths of a cold, damp cave. The mother, Agatha, was little more than a child herself, unmarried and alone after her family had cast her aside. As the thunder rumbles, she holds her child close, a daughter whom she named Ursula, and that night prayed to God that he would have mercy on the both of them. The small town of Knaresborough offered no help to the young mother, and dragged her to the magistrates. But even then, the 15-year-old Agatha refused to reveal the identity of the father. Agatha and her daughter were labelled as pariahs. Some say that she returned to the cave and lived there for 2 more years. These years were of course hard for Agatha and her daughter. She tried her best to make a life for the two of them, but was living in a world where a disowned woman and her child could never flourish. So when the Bishop of Beverley came to her and offered her a better life for little Ursula, Agatha let her go. She would never see her daughter again, living the rest of her days in a convent. Ursula Sontel was known as a strange child. Living in Knaresborough with her new family had done little to remove the stigma of her birth. Other children were no kinder. They mocked her for her looks, her large hooked nose and bent back, making her look like an old crone. As a result of this shunning, Ursula would frequently return to the cave she had been born in, studying the woods around it and learning about the medical qualities of nature. However, much to the surprise of those around her, Ursula found love with a young carpenter from the city of York named Tobias Shipton. At 24, in 1512, they married, but unfortunately their wedded bliss did not last. Tobias would die only a few years later, leaving Ursula alone once again. It was then, widowed and vulnerable, Ursula discovered a strange talent within herself, the gift of prophecy. Ursula became famous in her community for her abilities, and was able to earn some money from reading people's fortunes. But soon word began to spread, and people travelled from far and wide to seek the help of the famous Knaresborough Prophetess. As she aged, she adopted the name Mother Shipton. So famous and wise a woman was she, it's said that even messengers from the king came to listen to her. He branded Ursula as a witch, and in 1530, when he was retreating to York to hide from Henry's anger after a series of political failures, many locals feared that Mother Shipton's life was in danger. However, Mother Shipton did not fear Wolsey. She calmly proclaimed that he'd never see York, and she was right. Henry called Wolsey back to London, placing him under arrest. Wolsey never saw London again either. He died on the journey back. We may wonder why Mother Shipton wasn't hated and branded as a witch, given Europe wasn't far off the mass hysteria about the occult. But Mother Shipton was one of a long line of women who were much revered in England, women who protected their community with their knowledge of medicine and natural remedies and spirituality. For the poor and common man, these women often were the difference between life and death. They were called cunning women. By the time of her death in 1561, she was a much loved and respected member of her community. However, Mother Shipton's legacy is somewhat murky. Prophecies claiming to have been made by her were first published in 1641 and saw 20 republications up until 1700. These prophecies have been interpreted as predictions of great historical events such as the Great Fire of London, the Spanish Armada, the resurgence of plague, and a number of wars and rebellions. It's likely that her words have been warped over the years, with prophecies being added to further legitimise her power. These could also serve as a propaganda device. All prophets, from modernity to antiquity, have had their fame manipulated to suit the narrator. Mother Shipton was no exception. Many of these prophecies were in fact published after the historical event happened, adding a further sense of legitimacy, as if the event had always been written in the stars. Retroactively claiming that Mother Shipton had predicted the death of Mary Queen of Scots, for example. A widowed queen in England shall be headless seen. And another prophecy that supposedly predicts the death of Charles I. And then a great council shall assemble. The White King by wicked hands shall be murdered. Many of the things that we supposedly know about Mother Shipton in fact come from famed fiction writer and poet Richard Head, who wrote a book in 1667 that sensationalized her story and added as much fiction and entertainment to it as supposed reality. To his readers, Mother Shipton was a child of Satan and a soothsayer who foresaw the events that had recently happened. She lived just far enough back to make her familiar, yet strange to them. But Mother Shipton's legacy continues. Her story is told throughout England, and the cave where she was supposedly born attracts hundreds of visitors every year, some leaving offerings on the famous petrifying wall, a dripping natural well that gives objects a stone-like appearance. Mother Shipton lived 500 years ago. Her world was remarkably different to ours, a world where a widowed woman became a legend that confounded generations, a legend that may never fade.